I feel like in the past, I used to have a pretty good handle on who the average podcast listener was. And now I don't because there's no average. And that means that it takes a little bit more work to figure out when I'm working with a new client who their podcast should serve. But I think ultimately that means more opportunities for niche content that hits a listener or a consumer where they need it, when they need it. Yeah, I mean, in the past, it used to be the NPR tote bag wearing podcast people listening to the radio. And then, oh, look at that. This radio show that's beloved is now syndicated on a podcast. And now I'm talking about that at my dinner parties. And now it's so much more. And there's a lot of comedy involved. And a lot of the comedy audience never touches the NPR audience. And I just think like I could go on and on about how a lot of these different population bubbles never touch each other. But I want to be careful to do that because I think in a lot of cases they will touch each other at some point. I just think like people are so multifaceted and it's really, really hard to create potential listener persona nowadays because people have interests all over the map because they're exposed to so much by way of the internet. And then they go on deep dives looking at this thing, that thing, and then they seek out podcast content on it.
With so many shows now, though, do we still have that level of like falling in love and getting heavy into something like you did with Serial? Or are we sort of pulling away from that a bit?
If you ask 10 people about their podcast listening habits, I think you'll get 100 different answers. I mean, even for me, I don't think you can put my listening habits into a box in any way. I mean, I listen to comedy, I listen to news, I listen to comedy news, I listen to serialized shows if they look appealing on the homepage of Pocket Casts, where I mostly look for podcasts at this point. I look for anything history related. I like to test out history shows, but then I'll also randomly listen to something that is like not within my demographic that you would predict of me because I am very interested in bucking my own norms, which actually goes back to the reason I started my podcast recommendation newsletter was because I think we're all stuck in our bubbles. It's easy to find content, like you said, in our obvious podcast neighborhoods, but to go outside of it means that you become exposed to stories and people and concepts that you wouldn't know otherwise. And the great thing about podcasts is that listening in general helps people become more empathetic, but especially listening to content outside of what you would be attracted to on your own really helps you build empathy. That is why I think it's important to say, okay, the cover art of this is not attractive to me, and that's why I'm going to hit play on it to really just see like what it does to my brain.
There's a lot of talk right now about consciously breaking your algorithm.
Yeah, there was a stat that came up a few years ago from Edison Research back when Tom Webster was still there about how when people are podcast listeners, when they consider themselves podcast listeners, they listen to 7 or 8 podcasts every month or in whatever they consider regular rotation. Yeah. And I think the reason for that is because often we find something that we like and then we seek out more content on that thing, especially if we are more utilitarian listeners. Like if you need some self-help or if you're
I'm a utilitarian listener.
Yeah, cool. Love that. Yeah. Me too. A lot of the time. I mean, like I recently put out a list of my newsletter, actually this week, on mental health podcasts about therapy. And one of the episodes is titled, "Am I Hypervigilant? Here's how to recognize it and what to do about it." And I was like, damn. Okay, so I listened to it and I'm like, I might be hypervigilant. And of course, I saw this thing and now I'm in on it. And now I'm going to seek out more things on that topic in order to fill out my larger understanding of it. So I think what I'm trying to say is that it kind of comes back to the reason that you found podcasts in the first place. And for a lot of people, it's, I really like the Real Housewives of Pick Your City. So I'm going to get into the Bravo podcast universe. And maybe I'm going to listen to a bunch of Bravo related podcasts because I just love that stuff. And then maybe I'll hear a promo swap from a history show that is semi-related. Like, for example, there's a show right now called The United States of Kennedy, and it's about the Kennedy family, but it's also kind of salacious. And they do talk about Caroline Radziwill, who was on The Real Housewives of something. That could be an interesting crossover. So what I'm trying to say is like, there is no one path to get in, and then there's no one path to stay on.